going to do a roll call and take attendance, yes.
Okay, I'm going to read the names that I can see. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people on the phone that I cannot identify. So I'm just going to call your name. You don't have to say anything. Joe Pictionary, Pete Sorensen, Joe Burney, Lucy Venus, Betty Taylor, Ray Smith, Carl Ye, AJ Jackson, Ann Heath, Sasha Vartanian, Kelly Clark, Rachel Dorfman, Howard Schusler, Dan Collister, Tom Boyott, Emma Newman, Andrew Martin, Caitlin Vargas, Neil Moyer, and Rob Zako. So if I have not called your, oh, and I just saw Bill just joined. So
Bill Johnston just joined.
Bill Johnson. If I have not said, and I can see Tom Schwartz too. Just a second. If I have not called your name, please let us know if you are on the phone.
This is Ann. This is Ann Davies. I'm here for the Cable Commission item.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Franny Brindle from ODOT.
Hi, Franny. Thanks. Next.
Anybody else on the phone, please?
Did you get?
I see that Matt Rodriguez just joined us.
Okay, hold on just a second. I'm sorry, someone just said something?
Neil Ladati, City of Springfield.
Oh, hi, Neil.
Yes, Paul, this is Matt Rodriguez from the City of Eugene. I just jumped on.
Thank you. I'm going to start the recording of the meeting also, folks.
This conference will now be recorded.
Is there anyone else on the phone that would like to identify themselves? Let me see. No? Okay, I think we're good to go.
Counselor, I believe we're ready to proceed.
Thank you very much. Again, welcome everyone. I am looking to see the October 1st meeting. I'm having a difficulty hearing folks. Did I hear a motion and a second?
Counselor, I think your voice for me dropped out for a moment. To clarify, you're looking for approval of the minutes?
That's correct.
This is Carl Yo with LTD. I so move.
Second.
Third.
I've got a move by Carl Ye and seconded by about 3 or 4 individuals. I think Lucy actually had her hand up first, so we'll count that as the second. Sorry, Joe, you'll have to take second seat.
I always take second seat to Mayor Venice.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Now a vote for approval. So I guess, Paul, we can just go for a signify by yay.
You can, please.
Yes, go ahead and signify by yay for approval.
Yay.
Aye. 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 Perfect. And signify a nay for not approval. Hearing none, it appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much, folks. Is there any adjustments to the agenda or announcements from any MPC members?
Counselor, this is Paul, quickly on items C and D. Dan is listed as presenter for C and a co-presenter on D. Dan is available, but I'm going to actually lead the presentations.
Okay, and I have a hand up with Carl. Go ahead, Carl.
Thank you, Counselor, Chair. I just want to welcome Caitlin Vargas from LTD. She's joining us for the first time.
Oh, hey, hi, Caitlin. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Well, that should, never mind. Oh, sorry, I'm feeling jovial this morning. I know that's out of character. Okay, so we're moving on. So that's all the adjustments we have, Paul, that I'm aware of?
Yes.
Okay. So this is where we come to with comments from the audience, and anyone wishing to comment is asked to, I guess, not necessarily sign up, but notify Paul, and limit your talk to 3 minutes or less per person. And do we have anybody signed up or contacted you, Paul, for comments?
So, Counselor, we have somebody signed up. I only know one person at this point, and that's Rob Zako. And Mr. Zako also asked me to share something on the screen, so I am going to do that right now if he chooses to speak to this. And that's the only person I have signed up.
Okay, Mr. Zako, you can go ahead and begin. Do we have a timer set for him, Paul?
Sure, I do.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead and go then.
Thank you, Chair Pictionary. Thank you, Paul. This is Rob Zako, Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation, living in Eugene. Thank you for the cartoon that I brought up. I want to speak about item 6A on your agenda today, the Regional Transportation Plan Greenhouse Gas Emissions Goal. And this is something you've been talking about. But I want to jump to the cartoon first. And for those of you who don't see the screen right now, at a climate summit, there's a speaker there, and he's got up on his screen, energy independence, preserve rainforest, sustainability, green jobs, livable cities, renewables, clean water, healthy children, et cetera, et cetera. And somebody in the audience is saying, what if it's a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? And this is tongue in cheek, of course, but I suggest this is actually how you should think about climate change. Climate change is a global issue, and the Central Lane area could play a small, tiny drop in the bucket to doing our part to helping the whole world. But that's a really hard sell. I think really the way to think about climate change is the actions that you could take and should take to help the world are actually things that help us locally. Going through the item 6B, the 7 draft goals that staff have prepared, basically every one of those goals has a piece of it that's related to climate change, the things that you would do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions actually advance your other goals. So this is the long-winded way of saying, when you're asked, do you need a climate change goal? Our answer would be, it's already embedded in what you already have there. Whether you talk about climate change or not probably doesn't make a huge difference. If you were to ask our advice and wording, we would suggest the healthy people environment goal just to add 5 words at the end. For example, greenhouse gas emissions are reduced, period. Call it good. That's our first point. The second point, though, is that goals are really an apple pie.
I just want to say I can't hear, and I'd like Mr. Zako to repeat the last few sentences because I couldn't hear. Thank you.
This is Paul, and I have paused Mr. Zako's timer. Could we ask everybody to please mute their microphones? There was a lot of background noise.
Thank you, everyone. Let me go back and cut to the chase. So BEST recommends that for the draft goals in item 6B that staff is recommending, the third goal is for healthy people and environment. And we suggest adding 5 words to the end of that goal. Greenhouse gas emissions are reduced, period. Is just a nod to greenhouse gas emissions. The other thing we'd say, though, is that goals are apple pie. If you say you want to have a healthier transportation system or greenhouse gas emissions or whatever, that doesn't translate to action unless you actually quantify it and measure it. And so really in the sequel, not today, but later in the development of the RTP, we want to talk about performance measures, and we would look forward to engaging in that discussion of what to measure and how to quantify it. Thank you, and I apologize for the background noise here.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. It's not a problem. Bob, I'm sorry. So is there anyone else, Paul?
Not that I'm aware of, but I ask that you check and see if there are. Are there anybody else that wishes to speak on the screen, on the phone, or anywhere?
Okay. Time for him to quit.
Yes, it was.
Thank you, Paul. I think we can move on to item 6A.
I believe so, Counselor. So if you want to hand that off to me, then I will say a few introductory comments, and Kelly Clark from LCOG is also available to assist with this agenda item and answer any questions. I would like to keep the presentation fairly short because, as was requested at the end of last month's meeting, you wanted substantial time to allow for discussing this and hopefully arriving at direction to staff. This is a continuation of the previous month's discussions on how to include and address greenhouse gas emissions within the development of the MPO's new Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP. As discussed last month, there are two ways that we are proposing to address greenhouse gas emissions explicitly within the RTP. One is to have an explicit goal addressing greenhouse gas emissions. And the second option would be to have one or more objectives addressing GHG emissions under the RTP's other goals. At the end of the last month's meeting, I proposed that staff would give you examples and options for both of those. So we have included in the cover memo 4 examples of what a GHG emission goal could look like. As noted in the memo, the first two, and I'm on page 2 of the cover memo, the first 2 bullets there are ones that Kelly and I drafted, frankly, as example goal languages that could be used, but also are just examples. And then the third bullet is a goal from the Eugene Transportation System Plan that addresses this topic. And the fourth is an example from Portland Metro's long-range plan, their MPO's RTP. Following that, we gave you 7 examples of objectives that could be used in place of an explicit goal. And frankly, if you have an explicit goal, some of these objectives might just be listed under that explicit goal. Those 7 objectives are draft language that we pulled from other examples, and specifically the last one on page 3 is an example from the Springfield Transportation System Plan. So again, we've tried to represent examples from other sources and from local plans' existing languages. What we're looking for today is direction to staff on whether to proceed with crafting the draft with an explicit greenhouse gas emission goal, or whether to simply include objectives addressing greenhouse gas emissions under the other goals that we'll be discussing under the next agenda item. That's, I think, enough for now, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do I have any questions from the committee?
So this is Pete. If you could call on me when you get a chance.
I'm calling on you right now.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Paul, Dr. Zako presented his suggestion that the healthy people and environment goal be an additional sentence be added to that. What did you think of that idea?
Commissioner, I'd be happy to address that. That actually was a comment that we would pick up under the next agenda item when we look at the other RTP draft goals.
Okay, I'll be happy to hold off then until for an answer until the next agenda item.
What I will say, Commissioner, is that that is certainly another way to allow for greenhouse gas emission language to be introduced into the RTP.
Okay, good. Honey, nobody's watching me. Just come through. Listening.
Chair,
I can see Mayor. Yes, I see Mayor Venice. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see it first.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Thank you so much, and I want to thank Rob for his suggestion. You know, I was a pretty strong advocate for this should be a separate goal in our last meeting. I'm recognizing that, you know, that if my colleagues feel more comfortable with putting this as an objective within a goal and changing that language, I think both things accomplish our goal, which is to pull this out as reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, responsiveness to climate change is, you know, is a lens in which we're looking at our work. In terms of the options offered by in the packet, it feels to me that either that something that refers to aligning ourselves with state goals makes a lot of sense. We'll be doing that work in support of state goals, and so I actually like the suggestion as an objective of support state targets for reducing transportation related greenhouse gas emissions. And I also like that very specific goal of the second of those two goals that really cites the state statute. But so I'm just interested in hearing what my colleagues think about the options.
Mayor Smith, go ahead.
I guess I look at this and I see goals and objectives, and the description of goals and objectives, if we're placing objectives on things, that to me is saying that we have a goal to do these things. And I think there needs to be an overall goal in our work that says we have this goal, and then place the specific objectives. I certainly like the Springfield objective. I think that really relates locally and helps us identify much more as far as an objective. But I still think there should be an overall top standing goal that says that is our intent to achieve that.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. And Joe, I have you right behind Councilor Van Gordon.
All right, thanks, Joe. One of the things that I looked at from a language perspective, right, like on 203 at the on page 203 at the top, there was a portion in the goal that explicitly calls into the adds language that says, as an MPO, that we're going to essentially weight all goals evenly, that we're not going to talk about this from a priority perspective. I think that's important language that we pull through wherever we end up, even when it comes to performance measures, even when it comes to sort of objectives. I think that's probably critical for us to add. The other piece that I'm really conscientious of here is how fast the state's moving. And, Springfield went through this with House Bill 2001, so I'm a little bit more sensitive to it than other people is. We did a ton of work, and the rulemaking from the state came out, and then we essentially had to redo a ton of work. So I think it's worth considering, maybe agreeing that we're going to put a placeholder here and come back to it if we need to. It's worth discussing. Third thing that I think is sort of critical when I look at it from an objective perspective, on page 3 of 3, about the third objective it says to reduce the vehicle miles traveled per capita. Is we're considering objectives, I would propose we simply strike that. Because that doesn't I don't think that Livy wants to participate as well. That
I'm more interested in what she has to say, Counselor.
Touche. As we talk about other sources of fuel, right? Like I think that one gets a little bit more squishy. Anyway, my preference would be to have this as an objective out of the two. I think we're pointed in the right direction, but I think to me it makes more sense as an objective.
Thank you, Sean, and your voice does matter to me. So, Joe, go ahead. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. It matters to me too. I apologize. I would like to absolutely agree with Mayor Smith. I think that the purpose of if you don't have a goal to reach for the stars, you're never going to get to the top of the hill. And if you have a series of objectives without a goal, there's no context, and you can't develop appropriate tactics and strategies to reach that goal. So I'm going to throw out my language, but my main point here is put me on the side of having a specific goal in this regard. My goal, if I were king, would be a job creating carbon neutral transportation plan. That would be my goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernie. Do I have any other comments from the committee? I'd make my own comments here as far as I agree. We need to make sure that we have some wording in there that emphasizes and solidifies that list is absolutely not in any priority, and that they are all standalone. And so that way, frankly, I think we'd be able to look at each one all the time, as opposed to focusing our efforts on some sort of top one or top two and forgetting about the other 4 or 5. And I also agree with Councilor Van Gordon in the sense of I'm having a little bit of heartache with reduced vehicle miles traveled per capita. I don't know if that's appropriate at this time compared to the other ones. Again, I'm open for comments on that as well, but I think that one should be struck. Go ahead, Commissioner Bernie.
I agree with that, but with what you just said, Chair, but for actually a different reason. That makes the assumption that we're not going to be also advocating for changes in fuel standards, changes in the electrification of vehicles. So I don't think we can make those assumptions. I think we need to get to the root of what we're trying to deal with and not speculate about what vehicle miles will look like in that context. I also agree that it's good to set goals, and it's good to give localities maximum flexibility so they can tell us how they're going to achieve those goals. We're not the nanny state that's telling them. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernie. And I see you this time, Mayor Venice.
Thank you. I have sometimes trouble where do I wave? So I just wonder, sort of tossing out a possible compromise, if my colleagues would be interested in a general goal that is the top one suggested by staff, greenhouse gas emissions reduction, and a specific objective under that pulls from the Springfield TSP, to reduce vehicle-related greenhouse gas emissions. And so we're stating it as a goal, but we're using an objective that the city of Springfield has already adopted.
That's an interesting angle. I definitely want to entertain looking at that. So I have Mayor Smith with his hands up.
I would agree with Mayor Venice. I do like the wording that the Springfield TSP has.
It's pretty easy to.
Broad enough, but it's pretty specific in its category. I don't want to have specific goals.
It should be done.
Technology or state policies may change, and then we would have to go back and rework them.
Mayor Smith.
Sorry, I'm listening to the MPC meeting on some things that are trying to make a decision. So
excuse me for a moment, please.
Caller 14.
Caller number 14.
Caller 14, can you turn your microphone off, please?
Counselor, I can mute caller 14.
Yeah. Mute it. Thank you. Mayor Smith, go right ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know how much of it you missed, but I agree with Mayor Venice.
Yeah, well, right after you were indicating that Springfield's policy was seems to be a good a good fit for that, and then right after that is where we lost you.
Okay, I like what Springfield TSP the policy chapter says about reducing vehicle-related greenhouse gases, which is the major contributor. Also looking at congestion and other things that are semi-related, but getting into the very specifics and tying to Oregon revised statutes or any other technical thing, and technology advances and it changes, and we've been very specific to something, then it doesn't work. I'd like to stay broad. I think the TSP statement from Springfield is a very good statement. I think it gives regional ownership and things that we can easily achieve, but I do like the fact that we need a goal above all, and it shouldn't be an overall goal. It should be one of those goals that every action we do may not necessarily work toward that goal, but most of the actions should be looking at every goal that we have and say, we're trying to address that.
Yes, thank you very much for adding that comment. I also, potentially I like Mr. Zako's suggestion as kind of a nice middle ground that we can look at for wording, and I'm not opposed to that, and it seems to fit with Mayor Venice was suggesting and Mayor Smith. So how does that sound to folks? Looking at Paul to maybe seeing if he can look at some of that, and Paul, I'm pretty sure you can hear the gist of our conversation and where we're at, and if you can look back and for Mr. Zako's statement and come up with a mix of that, or a summary of that, maybe just the ticket.
Councilor, I'd be happy to try and do that. If you are able to look at the cover memo for item 6B, which is the rest of the RTP goals, and look at page 2 of 3. Goal number 3 on that page, the proposed draft goal number 3 is healthy people and environment. I believe Mr. Zako's suggestion was that the last sentence under that draft goal would read, lower polluting transportation or options are included, comma, greenhouse gas emissions are reduced. And so that would right there put into a goal language, greenhouse gas emissions are reduced. And certainly under that goal, some of these other objectives could fit.
Okay, excuse me, okay. Nice catch, Paul. And I saw Joe, Commissioner Burney, have his hand up. So go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, sir. I have trouble with any goal that doesn't have a target. And that to me, to say reduction is a soft goal. And I would like to see something that is a little stronger, not stronger, just more coherent, like, attach some measurements there into the goal at some point. Thank you.
Councilor, if I may.
Right ahead, Paul, go ahead. And I see Mayor Venice, did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Just to the last comment, I believe we can achieve both. The idea behind the goal is that it is a broad statement, and then under the final draft goal languages that you approve, we will be developing more specific objectives and in most cases, very specific performance measures, which is where we can get to those, more specific targets that we would strive to achieve.
May I just follow up, Mayor Venice, before? Thank you. Understood that I don't understand the intricacies of the process by which all of this happens, but I'm going to say again, and I'm then going to stop myself, that if you don't have a goal that's trying to achieve something big, you're not going to make incremental progress. So I think it's very easy to state that our goal, which may never be achieved, is a job-creating, carbon-neutral transportation plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. And Mayor Venice, go right ahead.
Yeah, Paul just said what I was going to say, which is that we're now establishing the broader framework. We're going to dive into the specifics at the next level of this conversation. So I think, my understanding of the purpose of this conversation is just to agree on that broad framework of goals and objectives, and then we dial in those things where we hold ourselves more accountable to specific objectives. So I think it's okay to be. I think all of the other language is very broad. All of the other goals are written in a very broad way because the understanding is, we have performance measures that are more specific as we get farther along in the process.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Venice. And I have Councilor Van Gordon next.
All right, thank you, Joe. I do like the Springfield TSB policy chapter as a basis. I think it's really relatively solidly written. I was so glad that we adopted it. Emma did a great job with it. From a goal perspective, I could be okay with following what Rob has is one option, and then using that as an objective, like what Joe described, or I could be fine with a separate goal language, and then we use that as the essentially the only objective. I think we're sort of narrowing it down on sort of two paths here, and I think it's kind of critical. And I think Mayor Vince brought this up. Was that the performance portion of it is a whole other conversation. It's going to be a little bit more nuanced because this is going to be really hard. But this to me feels like as long as we get the language in here saying we're not prioritizing things, and we kind of leave this fairly broad at this level, I think we're going to be fine.
Chair, if I may, when it's my turn.
Well, guess what, Paul? It's your turn.
Thank you, Chair.
You have.
Since a couple of people have suggested, that it's important that we retain the language around goals not being prioritized, I just want to ensure you that will be part of the draft RTP goal chapter. It would be language that would be right up front in that chapter and lead into whatever draft goals we prepare for the plan. So yes, we will retain that language that goals are equal to each other. They're not prioritized within the long range plan. Also, I wanted to just suggest that I have heard a couple of speakers propose perhaps a combination of the first draft goal, the one that says the region reduces emissions of transportation-related greenhouse gas, with essentially that last Springfield objective. When I look at the language that Mr. Zako proposed to add to the other goal, the Healthy People and Environment goal, and he suggested adding greenhouse gas emissions are reduced, I might just suggest we could add one more word so that it reads, again, going back to number 3, Healthy People and Environment. So the last sentence would read, lower polluting transportation options are included or encouraged, transportation greenhouse gas emissions are reduced. That essentially duplicates the first suggested goal in our other memo.
I think I would have to agree with that, Paul. Mayor Venice, I saw a flip of your hand there.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think that's a good way to path to follow here.
Okay, and I have Mayor Smith.
I agree with it also, and relating back to Commissioner Bernie's issue, I think measurement and everything, that's the objective part of it that we would either refer to what the state is trying to do for 2045 or whatever, but we would get more specific with the objective part. But the goal part, I like what we're working on here.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. Comments from the other committee members? So can I?
Joe, I have a question. Joe, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
No, you can't see me.
You never know.
I wanted to ask Paul a question. When Rob Zako suggested we put in the language of that greenhouse gas emissions are reduced, I wanted to ask a question about the trend, notwithstanding the current year of relative inactivity, but I just wanted to ask a factual question, and that is, are greenhouse gas emissions from transportation going up, and that by establishing language that we want to reduce them, it is in fact a significant statement. But I just wanted to know, are they currently being increased or reduced?
Commissioner, honestly, I am not certain I can answer that question with complete confidence about a longer range trend absent of what has happened in 2020. And it's also a question of what is the trend on the emissions? Are you talking within our MPO or within the state or nationally or globally? So we can certainly get back to you on that unless, Kelly, you have something to add to that.
Kelly, do you have a comment?
Sorry, no, I don't have anything to add to that, but it's something we could come back with.
Okay. So now's a good time if we have not. Oh, Commissioner Bernie, go right ahead.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Chair. since we're having this discussion, 2 points. One, if we don't know what the carbon emission is of our current transportation system, it's hard to know whether we're going up or down. And two, does anyone know how many, this is more global, it doesn't relate to right here and now, but I just have to, does anyone have any idea how many pounds of carbon is emitted into the atmosphere each second, including all the seconds we've been talking? Any idea? I'm going to assume not, so I'm just going to read this. 2.57 million pounds per second of carbon is emitted in the atmosphere. So forgive my sometimes seeming impatience for getting on with it, but that's the context for it. Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me to just share that sentiment.
Thank you for that tidbit of information. We appreciate that.
Chair?
Yes, go right ahead.
I'll just add that I don't, again, I'm repeating myself, I don't have that answer to Commissioner Sorensen's question off the top of my head. We certainly will get back to you. I do have a staff person sending me a little message saying that currently what ODOT is showing is that emissions are increasing a bit with current policies, but are anticipated to trend downward in the future, but not enough of a trend downward to meet the state targets. And I suspect that without policy changes, a lot of that slight change from a current increase to a future reduction is due to anticipated changes in technology that we're projecting already, such as cleaner fuels and cleaner vehicles, but not so much from policy changes that we haven't implemented yet.
Thank you, Paul. So, Paul, have you been provided enough information and direction on this topic?
Well, Chair, I guess what I'd like to do is propose what I think I might be hearing as consensus direction and see if the committee supports that. And what I think I am hearing is that we could add language to draft goal number 3, healthy people and environment, adding the now 5 words suggested to the end of that. Again, transportation greenhouse gas emissions are reduced. That would become part of that explicit goal. And then as we move forward in the future, and we don't need to settle those today, but as we move forward in the future, we will come back to you with draft objectives under that. And I heard a lot of support for the example objective from the Springfield TSP.
I think it's a very good summary. And I'm looking at the faces that I can see. I'm seeing a lot of head nods and thumbs ups, but there is multiple members that are not being seen. But I think speak up now if you folks, anybody out there disagree. But I think we've got a consensus, Paul.
All right, thank you.
All right, good job. Thank you very much. Good job, committee. That's that was a nice work through. So moving on to the next item, 6B, Paul.
I'd actually like to hand this one off to Kelly.
Okay, Kelly, take it away.
Thank you. This agenda item covers the remaining goals that we've proposed to you and we'd like to bring back for conversation and your feedback on and hopefully approval on so we can keep moving forward with our RTP. The goals that I need to bring up on my own computer.
While Kelly's doing that, this is item 6B, your cover memo. We just touched on one of them, but your cover memo on page 2 of 3 covers the 7 additional draft goals that we are proposing moving forward with as we draft the RTP.
That's right, and those, sorry.
Go ahead.
Those goals that we've drafted are based on kind of conversations that we've had at the MPC level with stakeholders, with the public. And these draft goals here are intended to capture all of those comments and those themes. So the goals that we're providing to you as draft right now are 1, transportation choices, and as a reminder, not prioritized in any way. 2, safety, security, and resiliency. 3, healthy people and environment, with the added language that we've heard from the previous conversation. 4, equity. 5, economic vitality. 6, reliability and efficiency. And 7, system asset preservation. And we appreciate any feedback you have here and your direction at this point.
Do we have any comments, questions, or direction from committee members? I think that's a pretty good sign, Kelly.
I'll take it. I appreciate it.
So, yeah, I think I don't see an issue with it. I don't see anybody raising their hands. And I think just to keep moving forward with the direction you're headed, keep the ship sailing that direction would be great.
Thank you very much. That's
all right. We got thumbs up.
Very good to hear. We appreciate your involvement through this and your direction.
All right. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Okay, Paul, we're going to move on to item 6C. And you said you were going to take that and take it from Dan Callister.
Well, Chair, yes, I am going to do a quick introduction. I will admit that the reason that I told Dan I would quickly introduce these is because I was not sure how much time we would have left in the meeting after 6A, and we have moved much more quickly than I anticipated. So that's good news.
That's awesome.
Yes. So plenty of time to discuss the remaining agenda items. I will introduce, however, 6C right now, and Dan is available for additional comments, and certainly he's the one to answer any specific questions. What agenda item 6C does is propose amendments to your Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, or MTIP, to specifically address 3 of the corrective actions out of the MPO's federal certification review last year. That certification review, if you recall, is what happens every 4 years to ensure that the MPO is meeting federal requirements. And in that certification review, corrective actions 10, 11, and 12 requested that we make some additions and modifications to the MTIP to address specifically the financial plan, the air quality conformity determination, and how we prioritize projects and amendments. For the most part, the additional language that's proposed in these amendments today is housekeeping language. We believe that we have actually met those federal regulations and those corrective actions all along. We just hadn't fully documented those actions on our part within the MTIP itself. If you may not recall this, but way back in October of last year, when FHWA and I came to report to you on the certification review, I summarized that many of the corrective actions weren't about substance. They were about documenting that substance that we were already achieving. And this is exactly that case. This is documenting what we've already been doing all along within the MTIP. So what we're asking for you to do today is hold a public hearing on this, because that is a requirement when we amend the MTIP. And then we are also asking for you to close the public hearing and close the public comment period today, because this is a bit time sensitive, and approve the resolution 2020-07 adopting the amendments to the MTIP. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So right now then, I guess we do committee comments after the public, open it up to public comment, or before, Paul?
I would suggest opening the public hearing now, Chair.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Just wanted to make sure. So I am going to now open a public comment period, hold a public hearing based on a resolution 2020-07. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this topic? Nothing, Paul, from you?
Chair, I've had nobody notify me that they wish to speak during this public hearing.
Okay, so hearing no public comment regarding this topic, I'm now closing the public hearing and opening it up for committee comment. Looks like this one is going just as good as Kelly's. Paul? So now I would like to entertain a motion to approve resolution 2020-07.
I so move. Lucy Dennis.
Okay.
Mayor Smith seconds.
Got it. So we have it moved by Mayor Venus, seconded by Mayor Smith. All those in favor signify by yay. Or
Yay. Aye.
Yay. All right. Aye. And anyone opposed, please signify by a nay or no. Hearing no one, the resolution 2020-07 is passed unanimously. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
And moving to the next item.
That is me again, and this is perhaps even simpler.
Really?
This is really, yes, this is a procedural item following directly from the resolution that you just approved. As the cover memo notes, once we believe that we have met the requirements of the corrective actions, there are a number of procedural steps we need to take in order to have those corrective actions cleared off our slate, if you will, by U.S. Department of Transportation. The first step we have met, we have involved ODOT's MPO liaison, who is Bill Johnson in this case, and he has concurred that he believes or is supportive of these corrective actions being completed with the information that we provided to him and to you in the previous agenda item. So we're now at step 2, which is we need your concurrence that you, and that's the language in the procedural document. We need your concurrence that the policy board believes they have met corrective actions 10, 11, and 12. That's it, Counselor.
Okay.
It's a little bit redundant, but that's it.
Well, I'd like to hear if there's any comment from any of the committee members regarding this topic. So the direction that you want, Paul, would be to just concur, basically a head nod with the with resolution of corrective actions. Basic, you know, you want to vote, or how would you like this?
Chair, I think just so we can send the minutes in to ODOT and US DOT to document this, I would appreciate a motion that the policy board concurs with the MPO's resolution of corrective actions 10, 11, and 12.
Hearing that, I hear, I have a hand up with Councilor Taylor.
I move that we concur.
And seconded by, moved by Councilor Taylor, seconded by Mayor Smith. Whew. And thirded by Commissioner Burney. Mayor Venus, you want to jump in there? Okay. Sorry for being so jovial. I warned you folks beforehand. Paul, do you have, let's go with a vote. All in favor signify by yay or aye.
Yay.
Aye. Yay.
Yay. Any opposed signify with a nay. Okay, hearing no one, it appears to have passed unanimously, Paul.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good job. And next item 6E with Oregon Transportation Commission, OTC.
And that is me again. And if you give me just a moment here, I am going to share the screen once more. And I now have time to do a little bit more detailed presentation on this item. So let's see if everybody can.
We can see it.
See the slideshow up there, okay. And what this is, before I start going through some of these slides, what this is a continuing discussion on the Oregon Transportation Commission consideration of different funding scenarios for the development of the new 2024-2027 Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP. We have discussed this over several meetings over the past months, and as the cover memo notes, at your September meeting, MPC approved a series of comments that I submitted to the OTC, but the two main comments were that this MPO, your policy board body, wanted to prioritize the non-highway funding category in the STIP funding allocation, and also wanted to prioritize grant programs for local governments. We submitted those comments, and at the October OTC meeting, the focus of that meeting just a couple of weeks ago was the PowerPoint that is in front of you, where ODOT staff presented an analysis of how the different funding scenarios would impact different outcomes. I'm going to run through not all 20-some slides, but I'm going to try and hit a few highlights here. And just to skip to the bottom line, what we believe is that we're going to ask you to basically confirm and direct me to submit comments consistent with the ones that you submitted in September. So let me go through a couple of the slides here if this is going to work for me. And it's not, so hold on a second. Okay, not perfect pagination, but as this shows, we're looking at the scenario outcome analysis right now. So we're looking at how these 5 proposed scenarios would perform under a number of criteria. And specifically, I'm going to jump ahead to remind you right here, if you can see that the 5 scenarios that they looked at were a baseline. I'm looking along the bottom here, a baseline funding scenario, an enhanced, which you can also think of as a modernization scenario, which would give more money to modernization activities on the state system, or construction or capacity increasing activities, if you would. The third scenario there is the non-highway scenario that MPC prioritized a couple of months ago. The fourth scenario is a blending of non-highway and safety. And the fifth scenario is the fix-it scenario. The fix-it scenario you might better think of as the scenario that includes, in the way ODOT does their programming, includes maintenance, preservation, and resilience activities such as bridge seismic retrofits. So I'm going to skip ahead a couple of slides here and show you that what they looked at were a number of things that were currently important criteria to the OTC, but as this slide shows, it was an initial analysis. There are things where they can improve the analysis in social equity, geographic specific sensitivity, social cost of carbon, and stability in funding categories, and what one scenario or another might do regarding long-term stability and outcomes. Let me, if you can see here, and I hope you can, the right-hand side of this slide shows the 7 criteria that these funding scenarios were evaluated on. They were evaluated on climate in the area of greenhouse gas mitigation. They were evaluated on climate in the area of adaptation and resilience. They were evaluated on congestion relief, social equity, multimodal mobility, safety, and state of good repair. So again, this entire slideshow is in your packet, but I'm going to, again, be skipping some slides. These are the slides that show how each scenario performed. I'm not going to dwell on each of these, but I'm going to use one of them as an example. And if you bear with me, I'm going to skip to the non-highway because that was your #1 priority. So here's the non-highway scenario and how it performed relative to the baseline across these 7 outcome areas or criteria. You can see that it performed very well on greenhouse gas mitigation, on social equity, and on multimodal mobility. Specifically, under multimodal mobility, you'll see that it notes that it cuts the time frame to complete the statewide biking and walking system in half. We would achieve that in half the time compared to the baseline. Under social equity, it would increase access for all users. And under climate mitigation, It would increase low carbon transportation options by increasing funding for transit, walking, and biking. What this scenario doesn't do so well in is the area of state of good repair and climate adaptation. Those two are very closely linked. And the reason is because if you look in the lower left-hand corner here, you see that what it does is that it increases non-highway, the scenario increases non-highway funding by 130%, but it takes that funding from that fix-it category, reducing it by 17%. And so, of course, you have a poor performance in fix-it or state of good repair. You have poor performance in climate resilience because you're not doing as many bridge seismic retrofits under this scenario. I hope that is clear. I'm going to skip to the bottom line, and there's a summary slide right actually here that is in your packet, and I also reproduced in your cover memo. What this does is it shows which scenario, which of these 5 scenarios across the top performs best and performs worst under each of the 7 factors or outcome areas. So just to give an example, it shows that under climate mitigation, non-highway performs the best, fix-it scenario performs the worst, safety non-highway performs okay. The enhanced scenario doesn't really change the needle from the baseline scenario. So you can see that, again, this is a little bit of a repeat, but that non-highway actually performs the best of all the scenarios for climate mitigation, social equity, and multimodal mobility. And of course, the fix-it scenario performs the best under state of good repair and fixing things, and climate resilience and adaptation, again, doing things such as bridge seismic retrofits. At this point, I'm not going to show any more slides. I'd be happy to address any of them if you have questions, but what I want to conclude with is a little bit of a summary from what I heard at the Oregon Transportation Commission meeting a couple of weeks ago and where I understand they are going in the next 1 to 2 meetings. The OTC received all this information at their October meeting, and the discussion I heard, and I've talked with ODOT staff subsequent to that meeting, is that they are understanding that the non-highway scenario gives a lot of benefits, and they were very supportive of that. But at the same time, they were concerned about falling behind with state of good repair in the fix-it scenario. And so the discussion 2 weeks ago at OTC seemed to focus around those 2 scenarios and the trade-offs that might be necessary between them. There wasn't a lot of discussion around the enhanced or the safety non-highway scenarios 1 or 3. Frankly, there were 1 or 2 comments from OTC members that the enhanced scenario would be nice to have, but it sort of seemed like a nice to have thing right now that maybe we just couldn't afford. Moving forward, as of yesterday morning, I talked with ODOT staff in Salem, and the OTC meeting on December 1st is now a little bit different than what I initially understood. They are not, ODOT staff is not going to ask the OTC to select the one preferred scenario on December 1st. They are going to present more information, they are going to present public input, and they are going to ask the OTC to try and narrow these 5 scenarios down to 2 scenarios. Those 2 scenarios would then be further developed, give a little deeper dive for the OTC to consider in January, and in January, OTC would be asked to select the one preferred scenario. Thus, I believe we'll have another shot at this, another chance to weigh in on the final 2 scenarios between December and January. And from what I heard from OTC staff and my own belief, our number 1 priority, your number 1 priority, the non-highway scenario, is very likely going to be one of those 2 finalist scenarios that the OTC selects on December 1st. So in conclusion, what I'm asking for you to do today is to direct me to submit comments on your behalf to the Oregon Transportation Commission for the December 1st meeting, further supporting the non-highway scenario and asking that they keep it in the mix as they narrow these scenarios down prior to selecting the final preferred scenario. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Paul, just a quick question. what areas have potential federal funding that we would likely be able to get some help with?
Well, I think I have two comments on that. First of all, there's a mix of federal and state funding in a lot of these categories, although I will say that the non-highway funding is less state in one respect. If you recall, the state of Oregon has a constitutional limitation on the use of the state gas tax money. It can only be used within the road right-of-way. So when you talk about non-highway things, such as walking and biking and transit activities, you can't use a state gas tax for that. On the other hand, House Bill 2017 implemented new bicycle tax and a new employer tax for transit. So there is state support there for non-highway activities. In short, there's a mix of both funding sources in all of these scenarios. The other response I'll make is that during the OTC meeting, there were numerous comments, including most particularly by the chair of the OTC, about how federal funding might change in the next 4 years. We have right now a 1-year extension of the current Federal Transportation Act, the FAST Act, and it will expire again on September 30th of 2021. And the hope is that there will be a brand new Federal Transportation Act that will introduce new funding and perhaps new activities or areas that are funded. If you look at what the U.S. House of Representatives have already passed, and that is Representative DeFazio's bill, that would increase funding significantly across many, if not all of these areas from the federal level. But I believe, and this was commented on a little bit at OTC, I believe typically what you're going to see out of any federal funding effort is more funding directed towards things like enhancement on the highway system and preservation and fix it, those sort of infrastructure activities that create jobs and fix our system and preserve our system. And while I believe there could be increased funding in the federal bill for non-highway activities, I believe it might be an incrementally smaller increase at the federal level. Now, that was just conjecture on my part. That was conjecture on OTC's part. But I think what the OTC chair was getting at was that if the state focuses a little more on non-highway, we might hope and anticipate that over the next 4 years or so, the federal funding might backfill some of those other areas.
Thank you, Paul. I have Mayor Venus.
Yeah, thank you for that. I had a sort of related question about the dollars. I was interested in the chart. So the page that has the scenario for the non-highway chart. I don't know if you scroll back to that, what page that was, but the chart of the not, yeah, there we go.
And I'm sorry, was it this one?
Yes, it was that one. Okay, so on the lower left corner where it is, that's a 130% increase in non-highway investment and a reduction of 17% in the fix-it. So, without attaching real dollars, I mean, the fix-it category things are all probably a lot more expensive than in the non-highway category, right?
Correct, generally.
So, there's a way, I mean, this is just supporting your comments about the OTC and there might be opportunities for federal funding for the fix-it. It feels like we get a lot of bang for the buck with investment in non-highway because you can do a lot more projects because they're less expensive. And so a commitment to doing that. The state has been short of funds, feels like I'm just supporting, I guess I'm saying this just as a way of saying I'm still on board with this option and wanting to see that go forward because it feels like we get a lot out of that. And I agree with DeFazio reelected and as chair of the Transportation Committee, we have a good chance of that federal being pretty strong and support the future. So.
Mayor, if I may, I want to redirect your attention to slide number 6 for a moment. Your comment about not having hard dollars, specifically, ODOT has not put specific dollar figures on these scenarios. However, what I understand from talking with ODOT staff yesterday is that that's one of the things that they hope to achieve after the OTC narrows it down to 2 scenarios, if that's what the OTC does, is that between December and January, they would then be able to drill down to very specific dollar amounts that would fluctuate between those two finalist scenarios. What we have at this time is this slide that shows you this middle area, the very darkest section is the fix-it. And you can see how from the baseline, it's reduced from, let's say, 1 point, it's hard to tell, but somewhere on the order of 1.8 billion is the cap here. It looks like this might be more in the order of 1.65. So that's something like $150 million difference in fix-it reduction that is then going into these three categories, which are the enhanced, and enhanced doesn't change. It's really under these two, it's the safety and the non-highway here. Non-highway is this one. So you can see what happens is that you get this amount of reduction in fix-it. And over here under the non-highway, you get this amount of increase compared to the baseline in non-highway. It looks to my eye like more than doubling the non-highway. And indeed, what the slide said was 130% increase. So it is more than doubling.
Thank you, Paul.
I have a comment. This is Franny from ODOT.
Oh, go ahead, Franny.
Hi, thanks. This is regarding the differences and the scenarios between the enhanced and non-highway. And I wanted to put a little context around that from my perspective and the work I've been doing with communities. One thing is the House Bill 2017 dollars really did address enhanced projects and specifically earmarked money from the gas tax increase to go specific projects that would enhance the system. We have not seen, other than House Bill money, additional money going to enhance it all. And I'm seeing that the non-highway scenario pretty much keeps the enhanced amount the same as it's been under baseline. So I don't see any increases in that non-highway for enhanced. But I will say that there are enhancements that can be done to the system that would also have a great benefit to non-highway. The Beltline Highway is one that we've been hearing a lot from constituents of needing some congestion relief. We have a lot of people, as you know, living in the River Road, Santa Clara area, traveling to Springfield to try to get to work in the morning and at night. And so we have high congestion. That project that we're getting through NEPA at this time does have a local arterial bridge as a component that would cross the Willamette Highway, or Willamette River, excuse me, and provide transit and bike improvements as well. So keep that in mind. And another project that we're working on is the Coburg Interchange, getting a design for an overcrossing with a wider bridge over I-5 so that Coburg can experience an east-west connection that would be better for not only trucks and cars, but for bicycles as well. So I just wanted to add that input for as we're looking at scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you, Franny. Any other comments from committee members? Oh, Joe, go ahead.
I wanted to make a comment after all the other comments because it's tangentially related, if I may, Chair. If there are other comments first.
I think you may be in line there, Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Council President Piscianeri. I just wanted to report to this body and to thank staff. If you recall the presentation that you invited Amanda Peets from the Climate Office of ODOT, did I have that right, Paul?
Yes.
Yeah, and I noticed her name was on the first of your slides. I followed up with her on the basis of that, and she was kind enough to have a conference call with myself and her Director of Electrification and Transportation in her office and the Oregon Office of Innovation. And as it turns out, Mary Brazel was both Amanda and Mary were very impressive. They were looking for public-private partnership opportunities, so it relates to funding, although not public funding. We discussed the partnership opportunities of a couple of funds whose managers I'm acquainted with fairly well. They are going to be exploring those, and it all related to staff's putting that on our agenda. So I just wanted to share that with the board and to thank you for that. And I see a direct intersection between the discussions now I'm having with their office, our climate, our negative carbon emissions goal, and when we discuss actual tangible measurements. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. So with that said, I think Paul was looking for support from the committee to move forward with these recommendations. Here, see thumbs up. You need to anything pass, Paul? I think you didn't necessarily looking for that, were you?
I don't believe we need formal action. What I wanted was direction, and that would be, as I stated earlier, direction for me to prepare and submit to the OTC on your behalf. Comments still prioritizing the non-highway funding scenario and asking that it remain in the mix for consideration after their December 1st meeting.
I move said consideration and direction.
Second.
There you go. Oh, Mayor Smith had his hand up before yours, Mayor Vanis. He got the second one. So, anyway, it sounds like we got a motion and it's been seconded, and all in favor signify by a yay, A, or I. Yay?
A or I.
Aye.
Oh, we've gone overboard. And anyone not in favor, please signify, but however you would like. Okay, looks like that motion is passed. We went ahead and did a formal action for you, Paul, because it's important. How's that?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much. Moving on to the, now we can move on to the Cable Commission.
Not need to be on the Cable Commission?
Chair, I'd like to remind you before Ann Davies from the Cable Commission staff presents this agenda item that the voting members on the Cable Commission are the representatives or the members from Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County. So while LTD and ODOT and Coburg members are welcome to stay, they're not part of the voting or resolution on this agenda item.
Carl, yay?
Oh, I was just waving bye.
Adios. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Just yeah, it was good seeing you folks, and it was good to see the participation. I really appreciate that. I think everybody appreciates that. So everybody that's not a member of the Cable Commission is excused, and thank you again. And we will go ahead and move forward with the Cable Commission meeting. Paul.
Ann, it's yours.
Okay, I'm on. So just a little background of where this came from. I think we still have the same members on the Cable Commission that we had a few months ago. So when we went through our grant process in the spring, we had a few issues that came up that some members of the commission felt like needed clarification. Staff definitely thought that there needed to be some clarification. So this memo is an attempt to kind of explain the history of how our grant process works and the different pots of PEG money that we get from Comcast annually, and explain kind of the thought process about how things have been distributed in the past, and just to have a little more clarity moving forward. So what I tried to do in this memo is explain in pretty straightforward terms kind of the different pots of money that we have. We get $50,000 from Comcast that until 2008, it was just that $50,000 that went to Metro TV. And then starting in 2008, we got an additional $50,000. And the practice and in going through the minutes some vague approval of this process was 50,000 going to Neil Moyer, who's the staff person for Metro TV, and 50,000 going to the other PEG channels, which are the public and education channel and the fire scrambled channel. So in some ways it was, when I went through the minutes, it was a little more vague than we've been representing, just in that there wasn't a clear indication that that was how it would get split up. But that's been the practice, and that seems like it makes sense. So I just wanted to make sure that the Cable Commission had the opportunity to kind of review how this has been happening and either rubber stamp moving forward how we've been doing it, or come up with some different way of distributing these monies. The issue that came up in the spring was really about separating a kind of more clarity in our minds about separating out that $50,000 that Neil has. It goes toward the government channel, and that is whether it's Neil spending the money or the cities and the county needing money to provide content on that government channel. So as we looked back at the decision to hold back $150,000 for City Hall, it occurred to us that was really money that was for the government channel, not for the public or education channel. And it's not really clear in the minutes, but Pam Berrien is our historian on this, and her recollection was that it was understood at that time that that money was government channel money, but by using all of what I call Neil's money, the government channel money for the City Hall upgrade, it would basically wipe him out and make it really hard for him to operate at all. So that was why staff came up with the idea of setting aside money from the second pot. And in pretty clear terms, the Cable Commission was aware what it was doing, but as time goes on and there's turnover in the Cable Commission, there's turnover in staff, some of these things get lost. So we kind of wanted to go through that and explain that most likely the thought process in setting aside that city money was that it was money that went toward the government channel, but that taking all of that money out of the money that Neil gets just wasn't feasible. So I have on the last page kind of a staff recommendation, which is really, when it comes down to it, kind of status quo, that we have a general understanding that the first 50,000 goes to the government channel for Neil to buy equipment, and then that second 50,000 is distributed through the annual grant process to the public and education and fire channel. With the understanding that it's not set in stone, and that if, City of Springfield came in with and wanted to distribute content and needed a big chunk of change, that they could do kind of what the city did, which is go back and dip into that other pot of money. So I'm here to answer questions. I have gone through a lot of the minutes, so I have a little bit of a clearer understanding of the history, what was said and what wasn't said. But for now, really what we're trying to do is get clarity moving forward about how these different pots of money are to be spent.
Mayor Venice, go ahead.
So thank you for that. And as clear as you were, I'm still a little bit confused. So, yeah. So we have been putting aside money for a future City Hall need,
yep.
and we've been taking that out of both pots of money, both chunks of 50,000, so that neither one is.
No, that's not my understanding. My understanding is that over the course of 3 or 4 years, the staff held back money from the grant process. So everything out of that second $50,000 pot. So the public education pot, we'll call it. So $150,000 is now in a separate account, and that $150,000 all came from the public education, not Neil Moyer's government channel pot.
Okay, and so that's something we have already done, but we are not continuing to do that. I mean, we're not still pulling money out of that pot, or are we?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So the city staff at the time that the new city hall was going to be constructed estimated $150,000 for equipment and to set that up in the new city hall. Over the years, $150,000 was held back, and it's in a separate account. And we've continued to check in with city staff to see if that number has gone up, and their indication is that it has not. So we're at that 150, and it's just sitting in an account.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Commissioner Burney, go ahead.
Thank you. So here's a scenario for you. Let's say that the $150,000 figure for whatever you just articulated, and thank you, Mayor, because I was a little unclear also. Let's say the cost goes down because all of my people in low voltage technology are talking about costs going down. Does that money just stay with the city, or does it go to reimburse some other pieces of what you discussed?
If all of the $150,000 isn't needed, is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that would have to come back to the commission, because it was definitely understood that it was earmarked for City Hall, for equipment that was needed to outfit City Hall for Neil's channel. So, say, for instance, the cost went down, or when it finally comes to it, they realize they don't really need $150,000. I think that we would go back to come back to the Cable Commission and say, there's $50,000 here. You know where it came from. You know what it was for. What do you want us to do with it?
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Is anyone else from this Councilor Taylor, and followed by Councilor Van Gordon?
Thank you. Is there anything wrong with just leaving the money there in case there is a city hall someday?
Oh, yes. That's what it's doing. It's sitting there waiting for that to happen, and there hasn't been any request for us to use that for any other purpose. So the $150,000 is sitting there.
I suggest that it just stay there then. There might be a city hall someday.
Yeah.
That is pretty presumptuous, Councilor Taylor.
I know.
I'm sorry. Councilor Van Gordon, go ahead.
That's, it's a valid point that no one's ever brought up, and we haven't brought it up, is, the money has been sitting there. Do we want to, if it was needed for some other purpose, the commission could certainly look at using it and then holding back money in the future if and when it did look like that would be happening. But that's not something that's come up, but it's certainly something I would think that you could discuss.
Councilor Van Gordon, go ahead, followed by Commissioner Burney.
So has the nature of the project, or have you discussed the nature of the project changing in a post-COVID world, meaning that maybe the actual infrastructure requirements are going to change because you've got so much in the way of Zooms and live meetings and broadcast, and live broadcasts, right? It seems like when you described the project, it was really designed in a really infrastructure heavy world.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yes. So I have not been privy to those conversations, and especially with regard to COVID and the changes that will probably be made quasi-permanently going forward. I do know that I don't know if Neil Moyer is on, I think he is, but I know that he has been in touch with Eugene City staff, and I think it was pre-COVID, to just say, okay, given what your thoughts are about whatever this new city hall will look like, do you still want us to hold on to that 150? And the answer was yes. But I think that was pre-COVID. Neil can certainly chime in here if he has more information. Yep.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, and I would be interested long term in discussing doing something with additional with that pot of money. You know, especially if the city of Eugene's saying that need's going to be still a little ways out. There's, you know, if we have another opportunity to do something in the short term and still meet that need long term, it's a valuable conversation.
Okay, thank you. And I had Commissioner Bernie's hand up.
Yeah, and then you had Mayor Venice, I think. Mayor, would you like? No, okay.
Actually, no, she was before you, Joe.
Okay.
So go right ahead, Mayor Venice.
No, I don't have, I was just going to respond to, you know, city council just hasn't even, we haven't circled back and talked about City Hall in a while. So, you know, I'm not sure at what point this is going to be back on the table for us, given what's going on. But it is on the council's agenda. We'll be talking about it, but we're a long way from knowing where that would be, what it's going to look like, what it might need, and so on.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Bernie.
Thank you, Chair. First off, I'm delighted to learn two things: that there may be a new Eugene City Hall one day, and that COVID will end. Those are two good things to know. All seriousness aside, it seems to me that we have a situation where technology is exploding. The need for all of our communities, not just Springfield and Eugene, to be connected is growing. Those dollars literally have been allocated and are sitting. They could be reallocated, or that pot, you know, that spigot could be turned on again. And I mean, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, and I hope you don't feel I am, but I think that our imaginations are our only limit. When I think about the lack of civics education that's going on in our schools, the easy ability through technology to bring those classes into some of these meetings that different units of government are having, the ability of technology to facilitate teachers, much less community groups, to provide input to those discussions. I just see that this would be a wonderful way to start doing some things that respond, that are very cost effective, if we could allocate those dollars to some interesting kinds of programs. So thank you. Again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. And I agree. I think that we can get monies allocated for the original project for the Springfield City Hall. But in the meantime, I think that that's money sitting there where there's a lot of good that could be done with that money today and help improve things today. And that's just much more work that could be done today, as opposed to waiting down the road, getting the City Hall outfitted with that money and then reallocating more money for projects that we could have done today, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So I just want to throw in, so the main idea of this memo was kind of just to figure out, not necessarily talking about the 150. So I'm wondering if we're at a place where we want to allocate a whole session to talking about that with some direction to me, or if we want to wait until the city of Eugene knows more. I guess I'm happy to take whatever direction you want to have to get close to a decision.
Yeah, I think, and I see Mayor Venice is nodding, and I agree. I think going back to the subject is where, yes, I think you should continue to allocate the first 50,000 to where we've always done it. I think that's appropriate in my mind, and to not change that. I think that was the ask for this meeting.
Yeah.
And then back to what you just said, and I think what Mayor Bennis was acknowledging is that let's have this discussion of what to do with that other money. If we need to do anything or feel we should do anything with it, it deserves a separate discussion at a separate meeting down the road. I think there's no rush. I mean,
yeah, if I could just jump in, and I would like not to get ahead of a city council discussion about City Hall and that is agenda, and so it's things obviously got shoved around because of COVID and other demands, but I think it would be good for city council to be able to circle back and sort of identify where they are in that conversation before we start pulling money away from that project. So that's just my request, but I think it's definitely worth considering another use for that funding if the City Hall project, if council makes a decision that they're going to push that out for any number of years. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to mess up anything as far as potential for the City Hall project at all. I think it's just worth a discussion to see, okay, well, there's like questions of how quick can that money be recovered? If it can be recovered in a year, well, City Hall is going to take longer, probably longer than a year just to get plans done and even a foundation scrape. So, I mean, that kind of timing is what that part of the conversation, I think, is what you're talking about. But I definitely am not interested in trying to, rob Peter to pay Paul and leave someone shorthanded. That's not my interest at all. So
thank you.
Hey Joe, this is Pete. Can you call on me when it's time?
Hey Pete, it's time.
Well, first of all, I never liked the expression rob Peter to pay Paul. It's always rubbed me the wrong way.
I don't know why, but I understand. Go ahead.
I love that expression.
Yeah.
Pete's like, get used to it.
Get used to it. Thank you for bringing up the topic of the physical infrastructure and how that's going to affect all this. I had a question along those same lines, and if Neil is on there, maybe he knows the answer to this, or if not, maybe someone else can venture an opinion. But I'm wondering how the technology is going to be changing to allow us to set up these virtual meetings easier than we've had thus far. Namely, that we could have county board of commissioner meetings or other meetings at the county level, say out in the boondocks where we currently don't have very good service, and maybe the lighting will improve, and maybe we'll be able to have meetings with, say, the Oak Ridge City Council or other kinds of government meetings where technology will make it easier for people to participate. I'm just wondering, do you think the technology will come down? And last but not least, will the new courthouse, whenever it's built, will that have will your input be part of that courthouse design? Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
Does Neil know the answers to those questions?
Neil, are you still on?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I guess I'm talking about two different things. I'm sorry for confusing myself and others. I'm talking about, number one, filming in-person meetings for a lower cost in the future. And secondly, doing more virtual meetings when the during the pandemic and when the pandemic's over, to involve people that would otherwise have difficulty coming to meetings. So I'm really talking about two things, and wanting to know if the technology is going to be improving and the cost is going to be coming down. if you have that crystal ball. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Neil. Do you have any other questions from the commission? Is there anything else from staff? Do you have enough? Yeah. Do you have enough direction, Ann?
Yeah. I don't think we need a formal motion or anything. What I heard on this memo is go forward as usual with a general understanding about the different pots being separated that way, with the understanding that the table commission may ask for an exception to that.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. Get some head nods. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Just a short note. Lucy, when you get a chance, check your chat. So, is there anything else from staff? I think we're good. So, Paul, I think that wraps it up. And we need any other comments or anything upcoming that we need to know about?
No, Chair. The meeting, I believe, is ready to wrap up. We are still planning on virtual meetings. I'll just note on the back of your agenda, we put those dates and we didn't put physical locations because we actually started contacting some of them to see if we could reserve the rooms, and they said, well, we're not reserving rooms at this time. So we're definitely planning on virtual meetings.
Right. Okay, sounds good. Thank you everyone so much for I think a very good productive meeting and a lot of good communications, and I think we got a lot of things done today. Paul, thank you for your help, and LCOG staff.
And if I may, Joe, you've done such a great job stepping up here and chairing these meetings, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
Oh, that's awful nice. Thank you, Joe.
I actually wanted to second that and also say that, kudos to staff, because I think these conversations went as smoothly as they did because the staff materials for really, really helpful and informative. And so I wanted to appreciate that. And I also wanted to, so we're not getting a chance, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Franny, because we got a thank you note from our Safe Routes to School, Sarah Maze, about the bike path connection on Washington, where ODOT has been working, and how much that path is appreciated, and that it feels safer. And they were grateful that that was included in that ODOT project. So I just wanted to pass that along. Thanks.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Okay. With that said, and Councilor Taylor, I want you to make note of time. It's 1:11. Yeah, we're slated till 1:30, and I'm adjourning this meeting, ma'am.
Joe, I appreciate that.
I know. I try. All right,
Thanks,
folks.
Thank you.
Be safe. Take care.
So much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.